trip down to the lake. What a wonderful time we'll make out of that day. Let's hurry, me and you. Grab your water skis and see dew. Let's hurry, me and you, out to the lake. Grab your friends and come with me. Let's head out to the water. Come on, for goodness sake, and let's go.
I think so.
Sounds like something that would store water.
It's the things, right? The towers that have the water in it that cycle through, right? That's what I think it is.
A watershed, no.
It's some place that they store a whole bunch of water, isn't it? Yeah, where they do that, they have one up by the Cub Foods up in Minneapolis. It's like a lake, that man-made lake kind of thing that stores rainwater.
I guess watershed, I've heard it in reference to like rivers, I guess, the watershed of a body of water. I mean, in the context of like estuaries and river deltas, I suppose.
I heard it in my ag class actually back in high school, actually middle school, 7th grade.
Well, I believe that's a place where water is taken and it's separated to be used for other purposes, whether that be testing or I guess that's how I would phrase it.
Oh, I've heard about it, but I don't know anything about it.
I believe it's the geographic area that is drained into a particular body of water, pond, lake, river.
I'm impressed.
I studied geography.
Oh, I didn't.
You know, we have somewhere around 250,000 visitors come to town every year, and it has everything to do with the lake.
The one thing that makes us different than any other community is that we have a beautiful, wonderful lake to offer to our residents, our tourists, and all season long.
Every day there's a different wave. It's just beautiful in the evenings, early morning. We truly enjoy it.
Black Hawk's a beautiful lake. It's actually the most southern, naturally, glacially formed lake in Iowa. So it's priceless in that way.
So if you look at all the natural lakes, you know, Black Hawk, Clear Lake, West Okoboji, some of them are deeper than others because they had a bigger ice block in them. The other lakes, though, which are the majority of lakes in Iowa and the majority of the recreational lakes, they're either reservoirs or constructed lakes, so we call them artificial lakes. This lake would be like a constructed lake. This was a gravel pit here at Ada Hayden. We converted this into a recreational lake. Other lakes like Saylorville Lake, Red Rock, Rathbun Reservoir, all these are reservoirs that are set up mainly for flood control. Lakes certainly provide a large recreational component to Iowa. There's no doubt about it.
Not only do Iowans recreate at lakes, probably 1 in 6 Iowans visit lakes frequently. They spend over $1.6 billion a year. I enjoy going to lakes in terms of, for myself, just for that connection to the outdoors, being able to get away from the day-to-day in terms of work and other things that are going on, and really just have a little bit of downtime and quiet time with the family.
Growing up, I spent my summers here on Spirit Lake, swimming, skiing, sailing, wave running, fishing, canoeing, and kayaking. I used to fish with my Grandpa Joe and his neighbor ladies. It was a great little fishing community. I remember one time I was practicing casting from the shore and I caught a foot-long smallmouth bass. I thought my lure was snagged on a weed, but when the bass jumped out of the water, I knew I had a fish. I started running around looking for my dad because it was too big for me to take off the hook by myself. As a kid, having all these activities that revolved around nature fostered a real concern for the environment. That concern has influenced my life choices as an adult. It gave me more of a connection with nature than I would have gotten doing something like playing video games. When you have a connection to a natural area like a lake, you begin to understand how important it is to protect that and other similar areas.
Black Hawk Lake was originally known as Walled Lake or Wall Lake. So the glacier was there, deposited all these boulders, and then receded. And then the most notable thing that people really notice when they drive past Town Bay is the two stone piers that are right behind me.
I spent several meetings listening to what everyone was saying, and the most astonishing thing that I had heard was that Black Hawk Lake and Lakeview were the best kept secrets in Iowa.
There's two of us couples about 30 years ago, 33 years ago, 34 years ago, bought a place on the lake because we like to go boating together. I've been there ever since, and I sure enjoy it.
I wake up every morning to looking out at the lake. I love the calmness of the water. I love looking out and watching the pelicans floating by or the waterfowl all around.
People love to come sit right by the shoreline and see either what's happening on the water, what's happening in the water, check out the birds flying above the water. You know, there is something about a lake that really is just a magnet to people.
We're always kind of fighting, I think, trying to maintain the quality of these lakes for the things that we want to use them for. There's always a balance between keeping the lakes clean, keeping the watersheds from having stuff come in, and trying to balance the needs of what goes on in the watershed versus the needs of the people that want to use the lake.
I think overall the water quality is pretty solid, but I think there are always some challenges that come up and there's always room for improvement.
Like a lot of my friends, when they came, their moms were all worried about the water quality, so they all got them a Brita, so we're not drinking straight from the faucet.
The Iowa River is probably the dirtiest thing ever, but after the water gets treated and cleared, I'd say it's good to go.
I guess I don't know. I don't have an opinion on that. I'm happy with my drinking water.
Oh yeah, there is definitely a water quality problem in Iowa. Because Iowa is largely rural, we have this concept that the environment is clean because we don't see smog and garbage everywhere. People also tend to think of water quality in terms of drinking water quality. We focus much less on the other environmental effects from water pollution.
I think everybody's doing a pretty good job, but we can always do a little bit better, I'm thinking. And we want to keep the soil on our property because it's valuable. We don't want it to go down the river. We want the watershed to be clean. It just takes time, but I think we're getting there.
This is actually my little bit of Black Hawk Lake, because what occurs in this creek, or what load this creek carries, ends up in Black Hawk Lake. We have lived here for 32 years. This creek had minnows, frogs, all kinds of life in it, but that all changed over the years, and now the creek is not a good place to be in. When I look at the silt that's accumulates here in Carnarvon Creek, it's heartbreaking. Once this had a gravel bottom, and not too long ago. It's hard for me to be shocked, but I'm shocked at the amount of silt that builds up here every year, more and more, in this creek, and how cloudy it is and hard to see the bottom in most places.
It's for everybody's good to keep that lake clean, and it's getting better all the time.
I grew up on the lake here, and you know, it was one of those things, you know, it kind of came and went, the ickiness as they kind of used to call it, but you know, now it's kind of been pervasive, and certainly a lot of things have changed.
In terms of the ickiness of the lake, I think it is, accurate to say that Black Hawk Lake in recent time periods is experiencing more frequent and more intense conditions in terms of algal blooms. Black Hawk Lakes, in terms of water quality, has its issues. It's an extremely productive system. It has high phosphorus levels, high nutrients levels, and sediments coming in. Probably about 3/4 of that is due to loading that's coming in from the upper watershed that has more of an agricultural base to it.
I'm an Iowa water monitoring volunteer, and I wear gloves when I get my water samples out of this creek because it's shown itself to be contaminated with fecal coliform bacteria. There's very little life in it. In fact, a few months ago monitoring, my daughter and I found a crawdad in it, and we were ecstatic that something like that could even be alive in there because we don't find those anymore.
The most notable thing that people come to use the lake, you know, it has a distinctive green color, and that's largely due to phosphorus. DNR tests for bacteria routinely, and we have had some positive bacteria tests in the past.
Bacteria don't care what kind of lake it is, they like them all. They can be an immediate risk to human health. So if you enter a water body or swimming or for recreational purposes and are exposed to different pathogens, you get sick right away and you can end up in the hospital, you know, within 24 hours.
You know, a lot of issues we have with, you can have with high bacteria levels. You can end up with irritations to the skin. In extreme conditions, there can be toxicity problems.
Bacteria are very small. They're only between 1 and 2 microns, so they can be the same size as a particle of soil, a clay particle. E. coli, which is the strain of bacteria that I work with the most, will multiply in 20 minutes. And so every 20 minutes, so if you start with 1 bacteria, 20 minutes later in a good environment you have 2 bacteria, 20 minutes later you have 4, and so on and so on. Outside, say in a lake, it depends on the environmental conditions as far as whether or not they will multiply. Typically, if you're going to see a peak or times when they have to close the beach, it's going to happen, I would say generally in July.
A lot of people will ask about and be concerned about bacteria issues in their lakes. Many times as people run into it in their day-to-day lives, it has to do with beach closings around the state.
You got to view Black Hawk Lake or any lake as part of a larger ecosystem. We know that there's many different varieties, whether it's birds, animals, whatever it may be, you know, different types of fish. They all rely on Black Hawk Lake, the wetlands around it.
Sometimes we don't get it, that it isn't just one segment of the stream or one area of water. Bodies of water are connected. Problems in certain rivers, lakes, and streams combine to create pervasive and systemic environmental issues. Humans have created an artificial habitat where we can feel disconnected from the earth. But thinking like this is a big mistake. We can't live without natural resources: air, soil, water, and minerals. It's in our best interest to protect these resources. The earth is our home. If we lose it, there's no place else to go.
When we look at the Earth from a perspective of geologic time, we realize that events or natural resources are produced at rates that are very different than what we are used to. Until about 15,000 years ago, Iowa was covered by an ice sheet. There was the Des Moines lobe, reached a little bit further south than Des Moines. When it retreated, it left bare ground and soil started forming. So it has taken up to 15,000 years for the soil of Iowa to form. And what we really care most about is the topsoil. And that ranges in thickness from a few inches to maybe a foot or more. This is really what is needed to grow crops. Now, changes in precipitation pattern, increase in severe precipitation are now accelerating the rate at which soil is eroded. And we are looking at perhaps 1 to 3 inches per century. Now, if you do the math, you can actually erode all the topsoil in 2 or 3 centuries, topsoil that has taken 15,000 years to form.
Iowa is a land of extremes. It had, originally, that is 200 years ago, we had some of the most diverse, most complex, most sustainable ecosystems in North America. Ecosystems that continued to give life to thousands of species in perpetuity. And we transformed from that very, very rapidly within a human generation to one of the most transformed agricultural and manipulated environments not only in North America, but in the world.
I think we certainly have changed the hydrology that was existing here on the Des Moines Lobe, which consisted of large areas of wetlands. When we decided to make this into a corn-soybean rotation and start tiling things, we changed the hydrology. We put ditches in, we straightened streams, we did a lot of stuff.
Would Iowa's water have been contaminated before we plowed up the prairie? I don't think so, no. Each different species of plants will have a different depth of roots in the prairie soils, and also a different configuration of the roots. Some are mats right near the soil surface, some are larger kind of balls, some go very, very deep before they spread out. And mixed together, all of those roots soak up the moisture and hold the soil from the surface of the land down for several feet. If you only had one kind of plant there, you would have a much less absorbent soil, and it wouldn't provide the same features. So when we talk about loss of biodiversity, we're talking about losing some of these functions in an ecosystem. And when we get to a certain point, we're also talking about losing the integrity of the ecosystem itself. Many of the ecosystems around the world were really evolved with human created fire. Long before even agriculture evolved. Humans were involved with burning the landscape for many reasons. It might have influenced game movement, it helped them clear the land so they could provide for their little settlements, might have reduced the danger of natural fire occurring, the threat of that fire. And because fire was one of the natural processes on the landscape, plants evolved fire tolerances and eventually even became dependent on fire. And that was very, very true in Iowa. For the vast majority of Iowa's land was not only fire tolerant but fire dependent. Our prairies were dependent on fire to clear away the thatch so that new prairie plants could come back up. Too thick of a thatch from these dense prairie plants actually smothers the plants with time and keeps them from blooming as they should be doing. I think the solution to many of our environmental and economic problems is to reunite nature with the agricultural world. And that means to reintegrate biodiversity back into agriculture. We can do this obviously with buffer strips, with corridors, native wildlife corridors throughout the state.
The government can pass environmental legislation and regulations, but it's very hard to make laws work without the political will of the people. If people don't internalize the importance of conservation and ecological integrity, it will be very hard to convince them that the environmental protection is worth making a priority. Government action is a reflection of what people want. Clean water is nice, animals are nice, but people are concerned about other problems right now, like jobs and the economy. One thing people might not be aware of is how environmental issues affect the economy, both negatively and positively. The environment could and should be a larger part of the economic discussion.
I don't think so. I don't think it's happening.
I mean, I think certainly there is evidence to show that there are certain trends in the temperatures over the years. So I'm certainly not one to refute it.
The Earth is going to change whether we like it or not, and for people to think that we are a big enough influence on the entire planet to make the planet some desolate, barren place is giving ourselves a whole lot more credit than I personally think we deserve. Because I think the planet is going to be fine. Whether humankind or not is going to be okay is something completely different.
Part of me thinks so, just because like it was like 70 a couple weeks ago, but then it's like it's freezing cold right now. And so I don't know, because like Iowa's weather is so bipolar.
I think it's happening, as evidenced by all the melting glaciers.
I think a lot of it is just overblown political stuff that, they just use it as leverage and something to talk about.
The changes that we are seeing today in terms of climate are much more rapid than natural climate changes, which is one of the reasons why the only way to explain it is to add the human factor and factoring in human activities to be able to explain this fast rate of climate change. When we look at what we had in terms of climate, temperature, precipitation in Iowa in the 1950s, and for these 60 years we have a pretty good record of both. We've seen the temperatures have been increasing. We have seen that precipitation has increased by 15% over about 60 years. We've seen that over the same time period, extreme precipitation events, really heavy precipitation, 3-4 inches of rain within 24 hours, have increased by more than 30%. With the climate warming, we've seen a benefit to the agriculture, longer growing season and higher crop yields. But they come at a cost. They come at a cost in terms of this higher amount of precipitation. The fact that warmer air holds more humidity means that we're getting more and more rain. More rain increases, and heavy rainfall events increase soil erosion, so we are eliminating the substrate for agriculture. We also see an increase in crop pests. They thrive in these warmer temperatures, and so we need to utilize more pesticides. The soil and nutrients from the soil are depleted faster than they would when it rains really heavily, and also because of very intensive agricultural practices, so we use more fertilizers. And all of this has complex relationships between utilization of natural resources, the climate, and agriculture that in Iowa is happening. And we are kind of adapting to these changes. We adapt to the floods. We repair, we rebuild houses, we pay back people that lost their property. There is some indication that we are getting more chance of flooding in different parts of the state. But when we look at flooding per se, we need to look at the whole hydrology system. It's how much it rains is only one part of it.
In a natural environment, you have about over half of the water infiltrating into the ground and maybe 10% or less running off directly into streams. In an urban environment, you have about 50% or more running immediately into the streams and 10% or less running into the soil. So urban areas do contribute in terms of runoff and also in terms of pollution. This is not necessarily the agricultural pollutants that flow off from our farm fields, but they are the pollutants from the way we treat our lawns, from oil and dirt on the streets and the like.
What happens to the rain when it reaches the ground? How does that affect surface runoff? Do we have more pavements and roads on the ground? Do we have extensive tiling? Did we have a really snowy winter and with hard ground for a long time? And when the snow melts suddenly, we can have a spring flood. The system is really complex. One thing we know for sure is that it's raining more, and then we have more of these heavy rainfall events in the summer that may lead to flooding. But specifically where that is going to be and how frequently that happens is very hard to tell, because we are changing a lot of the components of the landscape at the same time as precipitation is increasing.
We increasingly recognize the complexity of our environmental problems, and now in addition to flooding, loss of biodiversity, soil erosion, water pollution, we have a climate that seems to be changing, that's getting wetter, that seems to be compounding all of these problems. And what do we do about all of them?
Not at all. I don't think it's going to change too drastically while I'm here. Maybe in the next 100, 200 years we might see something go down, but I don't think I have anything to worry about.
I like the warm weather.
Every now and then I think fixing the pollution problems that are out there obviously would be a great idea, and trying to prevent it from happening, but it's not something on the forefront of my mind all the time.
Well, you know, the environment is like my sanctuary. There's some people who just don't believe in climate change, and it's a scary thing. I think that it's something that everybody should be concerned about and should be aware of.
Maybe when I get older and it starts like affecting, I don't know how to explain it. Maybe just more of like environmental issues, like as far as like animals and things like that go.
I kind of do, but right now I'm mostly worried about school, so it's kind of in the back of my head.
What I find really depressing is the amount of apathy for these issues. There's still very much an attitude that environmental concerns are not serious problems. I wish the science behind these problems would be better understood, that we could all focus more on the effects we have on the environment and the way our environment affects us.
So a natural evolution of a lake is to go from kind of an oligotrophic kind of situation where it's a deep, clear water lake to one that's more eutrophic, that has more sediment coming in, and effectively all these lakes will eventually go to maybe a small pond or even some kind of a wetland eventually. So the natural evolution of a lake is to actually get shallower and fill up, and that's mainly because the sediment that comes in from the sides, and also human activities can help accelerate that.
Absolutely, we're hopeful. We do recognize, and this is one of the hardest things to convince the community of, is that when we talk about a lake improvement project, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to dredge the lake. A lake improvement project in this case probably means primarily work in the watershed. And the idea being, let's do whatever we can to try to stop any of that siltation or any of these extra nutrients from getting to the lake in the first place.
Black Hawk Lake has been dredged twice in the past, in the 30s, in the early 90s. Probably close to 2 million cubic yards of material have been removed from that system, while at the same time our research and our information is showing that a significant portion of that moved back in. At this point, it's very important for us to sit down, develop an all-encompassing plan that discusses what our loading issues are, where our problem areas are, and what type of things we can do to improve the system.
When I started farming on my own, we went to a minimum till situation, and where we didn't want to lose no soil, and we wanted to keep the corn stalks on the ground, let them rot and make humus out of them, and not to waste anything. And I think our crop's been getting better. Everybody in the watershed has to take part, and there's beautiful programs out there to do things, cost share things. It's just a matter of changing your style a little bit to comply with what's going on.
Farmers need to be a vital component of this. I do think that working with farmers can end up being a challenge. They want to produce the best crop that they can, produce as much as they can. So it then becomes partly a financial situation, but it also becomes just getting the word out to them about the importance of the lake. And I know that we have a lot of farmers out there who feel the same way, feel very strongly that the lake is important to the region,
I am a farmer. I mean, I have a lot of empathy for the farmers. I grew up on a farm. My brother farms, our family farm to this day. And I have a lot of empathy for farmers are doing what they've been told to do, what they're directed to do, what they have to do, but there's just been something left out on this. They should be able to, even no matter how high the price of grain goes, they should be compensated for protecting this water that belongs to all of us, not just to them because it runs through their land. People that live in town aren't exactly exempt from adding nitrogen to the water either. All those pristine green lawns that you see, in many cases, don't need nitrogen. It's a learning process. We just need a whole lot more knowledge out there for people to be able to pick up. And demonstrations. Demonstrations by, I think, some of the water gardens that are being put in on people's lawns, and some of the native plantings that are starting to show up in towns and in the country that people can, these things filter the water a lot better, slow down the runoff.
As people continue to use phosphorus fertilizer, it just ends up mainly being runoff. And any of that stuff's going to end up right back in Black Hawk Lake and supports the growth of all of those microorganisms that are really detrimental to the water.
A bacteria is a living organism, and it does. It wants to survive, it wants to persist, and it has different means of making sure that that happens. There's a lot of questions about bacteria. It's been challenging to, I guess, enjoy the lakes as much just because of the algae blooms. I do think there's a great potential to get sick.
Right now, Black Hawk Lake is at a point where it has major issues in terms of its water quality. To not be proactive would be a mistake, I believe. We need to get the active partners at the table, which I think we're doing, and sit down and find solutions that will end up improving the water quality.
We're at a time when we don't want to continue to band-aid the problem. We really want to pull together as a community all of the constituents and do what's right to make a long and sustainable environment for our community, including, how we farm, how we care for our lawns, how we all contribute to the overall quality of the water.
Just listen to that water. It still sounds like a beautiful bubbling brook, which it could be again, I believe. I wish people would stop thinking of it just as the lake, as Black Hawk Lake, and instead think of it as this whole system that's all interconnected.
In 6th grade, Mary Kester's class was a watershed moment for me. She introduced us to the basic measures of water quality like turbidity, nitrates, phosphates, dissolved oxygen, and pH. We went to the creek in my neighborhood to do water quality monitoring. I got really interested in it and went around to other places in town collecting water samples. She would stay late after school and help me make microscope slides so I could see all the single-cell organisms floating around in the water. I would compare which organisms were from which area, and I had a drinking water sample as a control. It was a great experience, and she was kind enough to do a lot of one-on-one work with me. That's how I got interested in water quality. While in college, I worked as a naturalist here at the lakes for a summer. I did water quality monitoring as part of the Iowa Volunteer Program.
So I teach introductory physical science classes, introductory geology and meteorology. Yeah, rocks for jocks. What is important for me is to make sure that my students don't just learn something about rocks, but they learn about the earth and science and how they become scientifically literal, and they understand how everything is connected on Earth and what the humans place an impact on our planet is. I have an activity that I developed, and I asked all my students during 1 week, that's a week of Thanksgiving break, to calculate how much energy they utilize. And they calculate their carbon footprint. And so we start with the end of class on that Friday, and wherever they go, they need to keep track of how much they drive, if they're flying, where they're going, which car they have. And at the end, they put it all together, and then they estimate what their energy consumption during that week is. So when my students compare their numbers to average numbers in different parts of the world or just for the United States. They realize what an impact their individual actions are having. My students in that one Thanksgiving break week, 1 week, 500 students consume as much energy as a town of 2,000 people in Europe in a whole year. And they need to write a reflection piece, what they learned from this exercise, and are they planning on making some changes. And I have no way to follow through on are they making the change or not. But their reflection exercises, even from the jogs, are extremely insightful. They never realized where energy was going in. They were just used to consuming what everybody else does. And so this makes them aware of their impact and what they could do to reduce their energy consumption.
It's everybody's Earth. Everybody should be doing their part to get it the way that it should be, to keep it clean.
I think it's the government's job as well, but I also think it's really important for the people, the general population, to just make it aware that there is this growing concern.
Education. Stop denying it and accept the fact that it's there, and yeah, education and more research. Going out and finding and making it real for the people of Iowa so they don't bury their heads in the sand about it.
I mean, I think ideally a collaboration of people who know science and people in public policy. And I think people need to be aware of what's going on. I mean, there's no point in denying this kind of stuff, but you should also know about it before you support anything.
I think it's everyone's personal responsibility. We can only blame so many people until we start taking the initiative for ourselves and doing what we can to help our Earth.
We often don't think about the fact that everything we make and own comes from natural resources. More than 40 minerals go into cell phones. A laptop computer uses more than 60. Think how often we change and dispose of these items. Another example is water. In Iowa, we are rich in water. There's a lot of water on Earth, but very little of it is really usable. It's important to preserve our usable water supplies. For example, water from underground aquifers is often used to grow crops in dry areas. Is it wise to use water this way, knowing it will take thousands of years to replenish those aquifers? My hope is that we can all work together to develop long-term strategies to ensure future generations have access to the same resources we have today.
Geologic time is the way we view time from a perspective of the Earth. So the Earth is 4.55 billion years old, and geologic time is the way we measure that time, and we place events that have occurred on Earth within a time frame. I have my students, all of them, stand up and they stretch out their arms wide, and I tell them the history of the Earth starting from the tip of their middle finger for them is going to be their left hand. And I go through how life evolved and what happened, very, very important events, and the time when multicellular life came to Earth. And then I have a nail file. And a single stroke of my nail file on the nail of my middle finger erases all of human history. And that is this to just that little bit that I can eliminate with my nail file is really the difference between human time and the whole span of geologic time within Earth.
I do believe that somehow that need to connect with nature is in our genetic background, that we have inherited that need, and if we cut ourselves off from nature, we are less fully human. We're living less of the human experience than we might.
I could wake up every morning, and I do to this day, and say, wow, isn't it beautiful? Every day has some kind of beauty in it in Iowa. I've lived in California. I've visited the desert. It has beauty in its own way. But oh my goodness, they talk about Ireland and all its green. Ireland green? Iowa's so green and beautiful and looks so clean. And I think the first thing is if people admire their own state and their own backyard, then they're going to try to protect it when they find out it's threatened.
Sailing is one of my favorite activities on the lake. All the energy for your boat comes from the wind. You feel much more connected to the lake than in a motorboat. You have to be part of the environment to move. You go where the wind takes you, and you work with the wind to go where you want. Motorboats are fun. You can go where you want and do what you want, but gas is expensive and there's a greater long-term cost to operating motorized boats. This can be a metaphor for the types of behavior shifts we need to move forward to a more sustainable lifestyle. Sailing is a lot of fun, even though it is more difficult than operating a motorboat. In some ways, it's more fun because you can be more connected to the water. You have to have more skill and you have to be more attentive, but it's a great feeling. Change will take time and may be difficult, like learning to sail, but it will be worth it. It's important to be in harmony with the world around us. So grab your family, friends, and dog, and let's head out to the lake.
Grab your friends and come with me, let's head out to the water. Come on, for goodness sake, and let's go. Let's get in the car and travel to the lakes of the USA. Let's hit as many as we can. From Salt Lake, Utah to Havasu, Lake Mead and Little Wall. Let's hit the lakes, let's try to see them all. Grab your friends and come with me, let's head out to the water. Come on, for goodness sake, and let's go. Grab your friends and come with me, let's head out to the water. Come on, for goodness sake, and let's go. Salt Lake,
Little Wall,
Clear Lake,
Lake Michigan,
Crater Lake,
Rainy Lake,
Lake Mead,
Lake Powell,
Lake Placid,
Lake Superior,
Lake Tahoe,
Okoboji Lake of the Ozarks.
Grab your friends and come with me, let's head out to the water. Come on, for goodness sake, and let's go. Grab your friends and come with me, let's head out to the water. Come on, for goodness sake, and let's go.
Salt Lake,
Little Wall,
Clear Lake,
Lake Michigan,
Crater Lake,
Rainy Lake,
Lake Mead,
Lake Powell,
Lake Placid,
Lake Superior,
Lake Tahoe,
Okoboji,
Lake of the Ozarks. Salt Lake,
Little Wall,